Babylon. This sprawling metropolis, synonymous with power, pride, wealth, decadence, and demise, has made an indelible mark on the annals of human history. Inhabited by many different peoples through many ages, Babylon's tale and mark on history is much more dynamic and relevant than the caricature built in the public imagination. The early days of Babylon are shrouded in mystery, but it does seem to have been a minor power, subservient to the dominant Sumero-Akkadian city-states in the region, such as Ur, Kish, and Lagash, in its formative period. This changed after waves of Amorite migrations and then invasions of Sumer. The earliest Sumerian writings condescendingly spoke of the Amorites as uncivilized, dirty, and nomadic, who did not bury their dead and ate raw meat. A massive wall in northern Mesopotamia was built between the Tigris and Euphrates to keep them from migrating through Syria, but they merely seem to have traveled around it through the desert. The Amorites quickly integrated into Sumerian society. Even before their invasions, a few Sumerian cities began having Amorite names among their kings' lists. The Elamites of Susa took this opportunity to invade and sack Ur, taking their last king back to Susa, along with the city's wealth. Amorites would come to dominate the majority of Mesopotamian cities. However, the Amorites were not united, and it was every city for itself in the centuries following the collapse of the Neo-Sumerian Empire. Over the first 100 years of Amorite rule in Babylon, a humble port city was transformed into a regional player, taking the ancient cities of Kish and Sapar. But it was not until the Amorite king Hammurabi took the throne that Babylon would rival the glory of any past Mesopotamian empire. Hammurabi quickly expanded his territory, and when an Elamite plot was uncovered to instigate a war between Babylon and Larsa, an alliance was made to crush Elam, which Hammurabi did without Larsa's help. After Elam paid tribute, Hammurabi's anger turned towards Larsa for their failure to come to his aid. Hammurabi's battle-hardened army subjugated Larsa and her allies, thus gaining control of the entirety of the lower Mesopotamian delta by 763 BC. Hammurabi would rapidly organize a campaign in the north, taking Eshnunna, whose well-established trade routes brought in a formidable source of income, and through the following year, he would take Assyria, installing a puppet king, and his former ally of Mari, whom had aided him in his conquest of the south. Hammurabi is perhaps most famous today for his law code, which there are many surviving examples of, that cover everything from theft, slander, divorce, property owners' liability, mercantile law, and more. These prominently displayed law codes portrayed Hammurabi as a just and caring ruler for all his people. Throughout his reign and in the centuries after Hammurabi's death, the worship of the Amorite god Marduk would eclipse the old Sumerian gods, and Babylon would replace Nippur and Eridu as Mesopotamia's most holy city. Immediately following Hammurabi's death, all political influence over Elam and Assyria seems to have vanished, and the southern Mesopotamian cities rose in revolt against Hammurabi's son. He would militarily be successful throughout his reign, holding on to the south and keeping peace and prosperity in the heartland. However, Babylon did not have the resources to hold on to the north. Waves of new peoples migrating from the east would dominate. The Hurrians, chariot masters, would form several squabbling kingdoms, and would soon unite in the north. The Kassites also poured into northern Mesopotamia, quickly adopting the local culture. During this time of upheaval, even mighty Egypt was not immune, and would be invaded and conquered by the Hyksos, a people of possibly mixed Hurrian, Asiatic, and Semitic origin, who ruled Egypt for 100 years. It was then that the Hittite king, Mursili I, fresh from his conquest of northern Syria, set out on an unprecedented forced march deep into Mesopotamia, plundering all that lay in his way. The completely shocked and unprepared Babylonians were no match for his veteran army. This was not a war of conquest, it was one of plunder. After sacking the city, Mursili traveled back to his distant capital of Hattusa, with as much loot as they could possibly carry, and thousands of slaves. The warlike Kassites, who were minimally damaged by the Hittite campaign, easily conquered the demoralized remnants of Babylon. They would rebuild the city and completely adopt Babylonian culture. They would rapidly expand Babylonian territory to all central and lower Mesopotamia. The Hurrian peoples would join together in the north, forming the powerful Mitanni Empire. In Egypt, local rulers would oust the Hyksos and use their knowledge in chariotry and warfare to expand the Egyptian empire to its greatest extent. For over 200 years, this system of empires was remarkably stable. The great kings of Egypt, Mitanni, Hattusa, and Babylon all corresponded with each other on a regular basis, each referring to each other as brother, intermarrying within each other's families, and sending each other lavish gifts. In the 1390s BC, Assyria became fully independent of the Mitanni, and, together with the Hittites, cannibalized the aging empire as it descended into internal squabbling. The Egyptians, Hittites, Babylonians made economic and military alliances against the growing Assyrian threat. Then came widespread famines and invading peoples from the west, known as the Sea People. The entire Near East went into a dark age of sorts that saw massive population decline. Assyria was the least harmed by this, and took full advantage. The Assyrian king, Tukulti-Ninurta, would conquer Babylon, proclaiming himself king, and after ruling there for a short while, would destroy the city walls and pillage the temples when the people revolted. He would be murdered by his sons, partially because of the sacrilege that outraged many of his own people, who had developed a great kinship and respect for Babylonian culture and religion. In the ensuing Dark Age, Babylon would first be dominated by the Elamites, and then by a long line of weak Mesopotamian dynasties, and sometimes by other Mesopotamian city-states. During this time, a migrating people from the west, known as the Chaldeans, would migrate into the city and become synonymous with its inhabitants. During the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the city was annexed and treated with sacred reverence. However, the Assyrians were almost universally hated throughout their realm because their heavy-handed rule and legendary brutal suppression of any revolt or resistance. After more than 200 years of Assyrian rule, the Babylonians rose in revolt under the king Nabopolassar. He led an army of Babylonians and Medes in a 3-month-long siege of the hated Assyrian capital of Nineveh and utterly destroyed it. His son Nebuchadnezzar was Babylon's longest reigning and most powerful monarch, greatly expanding the empire. He sacked the Hebrew holy city of Jerusalem, bringing back thousands to captivity in Babylon, which had expanded into a massive metropolis with a population as high as 1 million people. A beautiful wall of glazed brick, and many temples, palaces, and public places were built or restored during his reign. Nebuchadnezzar's city, like the world had never seen before, had only 24 years left to reign supreme. His succession was extremely problematic, where 3 kings ruled over the next 6 years, 2 of them being assassinated. Nabonidus, Babylon's last king, seized power in a palace coup. He was not a Chaldean as previous Neo-Babylonian kings had been. He angered the priests and commoners of Babylon by neglecting the city's chief god, Marduk, and elevating the moon god, Sin, to the highest status. The rising Persian Empire in the east was led by Cyrus, who was popular with the population of Babylon, because he vowed to restore the god Marduk to his rightful place. Nabonidus had taken his court to worship the moon in the Arabian desert, while leaving his son, Belshazzar, in charge of the city. The Persians advanced into Mesopotamia, many cities giving up without a fight, and after a brief siege, Babylon was incorporated into the Persian Empire. Or, according to the Cyrus Cylinder, the people threw open the gates of the city, welcoming the Persians as liberators. Under the Persians, Babylon would maintain its position as an important cultural center. However, its political and religious importance gradually eroded. Under Alexander, he was so enthralled with the ancient grandeur of the city that he planned to make it his capital. However, he would not fully realize this goal, and died there at the age of 32 in 323 BC. Under the Seleucid, Parthian, and Sasanian empires, Babylon would continue to depopulate and its importance disintegrate, and its great abandoned buildings were either quarried as building material for newer cities, or simply eroded back into the soil of Mesopotamia, becoming nothing more than the small port on the Euphrates that the Amorites had once made great. This has been Epimetheus. These videos, drawing and editing, do take many hours of my time, and if you would like to help me keep the channel going, I would greatly appreciate any donation to help put back into the channel. It is a labor of love. If you like this video, I think you'll also like my video that I made about the history of Mesopotamia before Babylon, And, as always, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell icon to get notifications every time I create new content.